Hi everyone, it's Rio Cloudseek. In today's session, we're focusing on Microsoft Archive, part of the wider Microsoft Syntex portfolio. Now, why Microsoft Archive? Well, many partners and end customers may prefer to store data natively in SharePoint Online using the Microsoft Archive capabilities. This allows us to simplify searchability across the given SharePoint sites, retain security and compliance guardrails, and also allows us to go through a deposition review of both active and inactive sites. Now, first things first, we need to set up the billing mechanism through Microsoft Syntex via the Admin Center, and we need to tie or associate that with a Microsoft Azure subscription, being a resource group. Now, I'm going to take you through the whole process from step 1 to step 10. Any questions you may have, please leave a comment in the comment section at the end of the video. Now, let's get to it. First things first, we need to navigate to admin.microsoft.com, which will take you to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. This is the console where we're going to configure the billing for Microsoft Syntex. But before we do that, there's a requirement around billing that mandates that we need to associate an Azure subscription with the billing mechanism. So first things first, we want to make sure we've got an Azure subscription. So what we're going to do is navigate to portal.azure.com, and this will take us to the Azure Management Portal, of which we want to search for resource groups or select the resource groups service pane. And we need to create a resource group as if we were using, let's say, Teams Overage or setting up Security Copilot. We need a container to store this billing mechanism. So what we're going to do here is press create a resource group, give it a name, and my subscription for this directory or tenant is called SPF Azure Plan. Now, the resource group name I'm going to give it is Microsoft Archive. I'm going to make it very simple. And I've got to remember that it's got to be lowercase, so we're going to change that to lowercase. And I'm going to have my data reside in the UK South data center. We're then going to select next and then review and create. Now, it's important to note that all data within Microsoft 365 Archive is stored within the tenant for any given service and also follows the standard Microsoft 365 data storage guidelines available by your geographical region. It also works and integrates with Microsoft 365 natively. That means that Microsoft 365 security capabilities such as role-based access control, identity and app management, and other services you may already have in place also apply for Archive. So if we press create, that's our resource group created. Brilliant. We'll then give that a refresh, and we should be able to see this in the list. So if I give the page a full refresh, it may take some time to propagate. So while that's loading, we'll go back to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We now need to set up the billing. So what we're going to do, funny enough, we're not going to go to the billing service pane. We're going to select setup. And we're going to scroll down to where we see activate pay-as-you-go services. Now we can do this another way, where we go to settings, org-wide settings, and scroll down to where we see pay-as-you-go services. Same principle applies. Now, if we were to do it this way, it will take us directly to the billing pane underneath pay-as-you-go services, and this is where we're going to associate that resource group within that Azure subscription to the Microsoft billing mechanism. Now, what we need to do here is scroll down and select Setup Billing, select the Azure subscription we defined earlier, as well as that resource group we've created for Microsoft Archive, and select the appropriate region where we want our data to be stored. Then we need to agree to the T's and C's and save. We'll wait for that to set up. Now, in the meantime, when we do start to demystify the billing element, the storage for archive sites is metered and charged at 5 pence per gig per month, which is the rate for Microsoft Archive, versus the normal rate for Microsoft SharePoint, which is around 20 pence per gig per month. And to note, you won't be charged for any archive storage as long as your combined storage, being your tenant storage plus any archive storage doesn't exceed your standard storage quota. So that's now set up, which is great. We've associated the billing mechanism, being Microsoft Syntex, to our Azure subscription, which then has a resource group within. So that's ready to go. So we can come out of here. We can then select settings and select storage. And this is where we can access all the different services which relies on Microsoft Syntex billing, whether or not that be Microsoft Archive, Microsoft Backup for C2C, whether or not that be OCR, and Teams overage, so on and so forth. Now, if I select Archive, it will give us two options. Now, I may want to enable both. I may want to enable only one of these. There's no best practice. It's just, what does your business require? Now, I need to be able to archive SharePoint sites, right? And at this moment in time, we can't archive SharePoint sites which are attached to Teams enabled channels, right? That's the limitation at the moment. But what we can do is archive any other sites outside of that remit. So we're going to enable the SharePoint sites. And then down here, we've also got the ability to enable archiving OneDrive accounts. Now, there was a change made a few months back wherein if you've got user accounts which are unlicensed, their OneDrive is retained for up to 93 days. After such time, it's purged, unless you've enabled Microsoft Archive. All right. Now, once again, another date to keep in note, as of March 31st, 2025, Microsoft has also eliminated the reactivation fee for archived SharePoint sites and its content. And reactivating archived content is now free of charge. Right? Now, once you've enabled the toggles and you've defined the requirements for your business, whether or not you want to archive SharePoint sites or archive OneDrive accounts, we're ready to go. So what we could do now is select Go to Microsoft 365 Archive. And what this will take us to is the SharePoint Admin Center, where we'll see a list of archived sites, if any. All right. So the way in which we archive a site is by accessing active sites, selecting an appropriate site. So let's say we select the Copilot site here, and then there's an option to archive. Now we can select archive, and it will give us a policy tip where it says reactivation is required to access the site and its content. Sites archived within the last 7 days can be reactivated instantly. However, sites archived for more than 7 days may take up to 24 hours to reactivate and must wait 4 months before archiving again. So that's an FYI. So if we were to archive, you can see that the site has now been archived. Now, if I close this down and select archived sites, you'll notice the site is now in the archived sites list. Now, as soon as the site is archived, it stops consuming storage from the active storage quota, and the storage starts being counted towards the archive storage. And there may be a delay in the change in storage being reflected in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So that's just a note. Now, if I want to reactivate this site, I can do that through reactivation here, and then press reactivate. And then you will see the site once again propagate in the list of active sites. Now, when you do archive a site, end users won't be able to access the site or search for any content that has been archived. Whenever the user does try to access the archived content, they'll see a message stating that the site has been archived, and you can redirect them to a different URL and present your own, let's say, splash screen or smart screen by connecting to SharePoint Online and setting the SPO tenant -archive redirect URL to your own preferred URL of choice. Now, if we want to see those, let's say, OneDrive accounts we were talking about earlier, if we select reports and select OneDrive accounts, here you can see all those OneDrive users who don't have a license, of which you may want to retain in the OneDrive archive. Now, the common question I get is, how do I quote this? How do I cost this up? It's very simple. Natively, if we were provided a quote from Microsoft Azure via ACR, Azure Consumption Revenue, we'll use the Azure calculator. If it was a Microsoft 365 service, typically we would look at the price file and provide them options around NCE, New Commerce Experience, whether or not that be monthly, annual, triannual. However, this sits in the middle, this particular solution, being Microsoft Archive, of which Microsoft have made an archive cost calculator available to the wider public. And this is found on the Microsoft documentation. Now, there's three things we need to populate within this Excel. The first thing being the active tenant storage quota in terabyte, which is found in the SharePoint Admin Center for the customer you're trying to provide a quote to. Here, in this instance, I've just put 10 terabyte down. Second line is your active storage usage. So how much are you actively using out of that 10 terabyte allocation? Once again, I've put 2 terabyte down to make it simple, which means we have 8 terabyte available for us to consume. However, the third line item we need to populate is how much archive storage do we expect to use in terabyte per annum? And that's the important piece there, per annum. I'm saying 9 terabyte. So we already know we've got 8 terabyte of allocation free, and we're going to use 9 terabyte per annum, which leaves us with 1 terabyte. If we convert that into gigabyte, that's what, let's just say 1000 for simplicity terms, 1024. We then times that by 0.5, which is the cost per gig, and that will give us the $51. Of course, convert that into GBP, whatever that may be, but that's how simple it is. It will also give you the percentage saves by using Microsoft Archive in comparison to just storing data in SharePoint natively. Your estimated total monthly saving by using Archive, and the monthly storage cost if you do not use Archive and only use the standard active SharePoint storage. There is also another tab here which breaks down the kind of the background calculations, but in all honesty, just populate these three fields, it spits out a cost. Now, Microsoft have made it quite clear in the documentation that this is an indicative calculator. It's never going to be 100% accurate, but definitely gives you a slight narrative around those cost conversations. Yeah, this was my video on Archive. Any questions, please let me know. Like I said, really easy to set up out of the box. You just need to set up the syntax billing, tie it to Archive, and then go through the sites you want to archive. Thank you very much. Any questions, please do let me know.